Okay, so when I first busted into the wine business way back when in the early 90s, actually that was quite some time ago, one of the most exciting things that happened to us at that particular time was these wines from the south of France that we'd never heard of before. These wines from this area called the Languedoc, and we needed people that knew how to say Languedoc to come and explain them to us. And basically what happened is there was a couple guys leading the charge. Well, actually one main guy leading the charge at that time. The guy next to me. And he won't say it, or maybe he will.
Jeff Davies.
Jeff Davies. That's his name. He won't say he was one of the pioneering guys in Languedoc. But anyway, he was one of the cats that when we first started getting the Languedoc wines in the early 90s, he brought in this slew of really fantastic, progressive, exciting, revolutionary, pioneering, should I continue or no?
That's good.
Really good wines at fantastic prices. Now, basically it's been 20 years. And what we're still seeing is some fantastic wines from the Languedoc. But what I'm seeing now is a variance in styles. And Jeffrey, thank you for coming. Chin chin.
My pleasure to be here.
Word. We're talking about red wine, drinking white wine, but I'm okay with that if you're okay with it. Okay. It's wine, right? So what we have here in front of us right now is two different, what I think are equally exciting Languedoc wines, but for maybe very different reasons. Yeah. Both of them you're behind in one way or another. Mm-hmm. And actually, I just want to talk about what makes these wines different and kind of the current, what's happening in Languedoc right now. Why is it still such an exciting, vibrant place? So should we start with Mas d'Ozières?
We can do that. Yeah. And you're right. It was back in the early 90s that all of this really got started. We had a period of 3 mediocre vintages in Bordeaux, 91, 92, 93, maybe even 94. And it was clear to me that if we were going to keep doing business, we had to find wines from other sources. And that's when we started going down to the Languedoc, and we found a lot of young people who shared our passion for fine wine. They didn't always have the financial wherewithal nor the technical means to make the best wines at that time that could possibly be made. Mm-hmm. But they had the passion, they had the drive, and we worked closely together, and I think that was a real turning point period in the Languedoc when we saw all kinds of very interesting wines. So during this 3 or 4 year period between 91 and 94, we started to find all kinds of interesting wines emerging from a band that runs along the Mediterranean from Narbonne to Montpellier. Mm-hmm. And this is perhaps not surprising because this is where the Romans first planted vines over 2,000 years ago. I mean, this was the Appian Way, or the Via Domitia, that took the Romans into France through Nice, over to Marseille, then to Montpellier, to Béziers, Narbonne, and then they headed north through Carcassonne, Toulouse, Bordeaux, and all the way up into England. And everywhere they went, they tended to plant vines to have something for their troops to drink and to improve their morale. And because frequently the water wasn't always palatable or safe to drink. Potable is actually the word. So it was an exciting time. I think there was a bit of a lull when 2000 came around because suddenly Bordeaux was back in the limelight.
It's happening again, right?
And not only did we have great quality wines from Bordeaux, but also we started to see some great value wine coming from Bordeaux. Right. And that had been one of the primary angles of attack for the Languedoc wines up until that period. Yeah. So there was a lull, but I think more recently, since I don't know exactly where you'd put a finger on it, but certainly in the last 5 to 6 years, we've seen a new resurgence in the Languedoc. I think that people are better trained now in how to maintain and look after their vineyards. I think they have a better understanding of what needs to go on in the cellars. I think they have a better understanding, which is true all over France, about when is the best moment to harvest in order to capture those ripe tannins that are so important to the quality of a wine. They have made some money now so that they can afford better equipment in the cellars, and therefore if they're using barrels they can afford newer and better quality barrels. And then there's the other approach, which is not to use barrels at all. Yeah. And I think that's fine. Yeah. Because it allows you to make a cleaner, fruitier, more forthright style that I think there's a growing market for. Mm-hmm. That's the case, for example, with Irène Tolleré and her Mas d'Ozières wine called Les Éclats. An éclat in French is like when somebody breaks out laughing, we talk about an éclat de rire. but it's also like a shard of stone.
Mm-hmm.
And indeed, her vineyards are filled but nothing with stone shards, making it very hard to walk through them, and your ankles are going one way and your knees the other and so forth. But this is all stone shards that have broken down and eroded from the Pic Saint-Loup.
Okay.
And in fact, the area where she is located will officially be assimilated into the Pic Saint-Loup appellation, which will be its own appellation, probably in 2014.
Oh, okay. That's when we
So-
start seeing Pic Saint-Loup on the bottles.
Exactly. And so the name of this cuvee was sort of a play on words. There was the soil type, which is these shards of stone, and the fact that she hoped that as people drank it, they would enjoy themselves and possibly even break out laughing, which has happened to us on more than one occasion.
Hey-o.
And this is a very typical quality blend, I would say, from the eastern Languedoc, because we're in the hills above Montpellier, and we find GSM, Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvèdre. Her vines now probably age about 20, 21 years of age, which is a respectable age, particularly where Syrah is concerned, and Mourvèdre, you can find some older Grenache. All of the fruit is hand harvested. It's moved by gravity flow uniquely into cement tanks where it's fermented, does its matto, and is aged. So everything is done in tank. It's a just say no to oak wine. Spends about a year in tank, and then is bottled with a minimum of filtration and fining as absolutely necessary. And in my experience, it's been one of the most Burgundian-styled wines that I've encountered in the Languedoc. There's a sense of place. There's an elegance. It's not massively powerful, and perhaps it, without offending anyone, I think it has a certain feminine quality, much like the owner, Irene Tolleray. So it's been a wine that we've had a lot of fun with. I think it's important for consumers to know that these wines, I think, are best enjoyed served cool, which probably means between 55 and 60 max. And if you can take 2 minutes to decant them, they are vastly improved. Because with these grape varieties, there does tend to be the problem of reduction, where the wines can be very closed on the nose. And if you'll just take the time to decant them, 2 minutes, it will really open up and it'll really catalyze their development.
You talked about the Burgundian refinement in this wine, and I got it in spades. I mean, the wine was like just brilliantly pretty. And you know, pretty wasn't something we equated with the Languedoc when this all kicked in. It was like good type wines. And this wine was like really,
You do have wide swings in temperatures between daytime and nighttime, and therefore the ripening process is somewhat slowed down so that the tannins have a chance to catch up with the sugars. And by the time she harvests, usually in the first week or maybe second week of October, you've got fully ripe tannins, but not massively high sugars. And therefore, as you see on this wine, she comes in at 13.5%, which in Languedoc terms is probably average.
right.
And the wines, thanks in part to those cool nighttime temperatures, I think retain a more complex aromatic palate, as well as being very pleasing on the palate, and very soft, supple tannins always.